Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I am honored to have my friend, author, savant of all things Black history. I'm gonna let her introduce herself though before I go too heavy. Why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Yes, I'm Dawnavyn James. I am an author.
Yes, you
Uh,
are.
I am a Black history researcher, a Black history educator, former kindergarten teacher, and I teach Black history because I know it's important, especially for littles, for kindergartners, but specifically for elementary educators. So I teach. I used to teach students how to ways to learn Black history, and now I teach teachers.
Sometimes us adults are the harder ones to teach
Yeah,
something to.
yeah, sometimes.
So I'm grateful to you for this labor of love you are on. Um, I love the way that this. Well, let me just go ahead and plug it real quick. Uh, your book, Beyond February,
Yes.
um, teaching Black history any day, every day, and all year long. I Come on now. Um, I love the way you start because it reminds me of a headline that I saw in Florida
Mhm.
with the bans of all things Black history. They can call it everything else that they want, but they banning Black people in
Yeah.
Florida. Um, Churches stepped up and said, "All right, well, if y'all ain't gonna teach it,
We
we
are.
gonna teach it."
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you start this book by talking about you standing in front in the plaid dress, uh, with the yeah. I listen. I saw the picture and I was like, I might not have been to that church, but I've been to one just like it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You stood in the front and you had to present, and you were Madam C.J. Walker.
Yes, I would.
Uh, I listen. I was usually given MLK.
Okay, yeah.
Usually.
Hmm.
Uh, there were other times where I had to be Booker T.
Okay.
Occasionally, I was given Malcolm.
Okay. I love Malcolm.
Occasionally,
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah.
But you stood in front and you presented that information and you embodied Madam CJ. Talk to me. Uh, Even like so. There's two things that I see there. One is this was part of your history,
Right.
and it's part of the present that we're seeing with this attack on Black history from both perspectives. Kind of just share your heart for you know how we're navigating it then and how we're navigating it now.
Yeah, just again, like growing up in the Black church, we had this Black history program. Everything we did was Black, really. And then growing up in my house, like grew up around Blackness, Martin Luther King Jr., Black Jesus, like that was the thing. And I learned more Black history at home than I ever did, and at church than I ever did at school. And so I think it's unfortunately very similar now. And so that article you mentioned, like I read that too, and I'm like, absolutely. There's other ways to educate students, children, on Black history, and so it's really cool to see what the Black church or what the churches are doing to bring that in, because that's how I began my journey too. So I think it's beautiful to see that the church is like, yep, we got that. Y'all don't even worry about it. We got it. So I love that.
Yeah, yeah. Your experience, I concur because for me, I think like the first time outside of like your Fab Five in February,
Yeah.
right? Outside of MLK, Rosa Parks, maybe if you were lucky, you got to Malcolm.
Yeah.
Um,
Now you got Harriet
right?
Tubman.
Harriet Tubman, maybe George Washington Carver,
Yeah.
maybe because of Peanuts, maybe.
Yes.
You know, like those are the usual suspects, but I didn't learn much about my. I almost feel like not even I almost. I feel robbed in my education
Man.
um, of all the great history that is us.
Yes. Oof.
Um, Remember seeing and reading about the Revolutionary War, and the first time that I saw a depiction of a black person in high school in my textbook was Crispus Attucks, and he was shot.
Right.
That's that's the first time I remember anything like that. And we were supposed to remember his name, and we were supposed to remember what? That he was shot.
What?
That was it. And and so I think about that, and I think about what our babies are learning or are not
Mhm.
learning. And you are, you know, doing this work from you've done this work from many different vantage points.
Mhm.
So my question is, with all of that, is how do you see the present state of Black history? Like, if you had to give it a grade,
Ooh.
as problematic as grades can be, but if you had to give it a grade for where we are, what grade would you give it and why?
Ooh. I think I would give it a. I'll speak to elementary. I would give it a, a D. I would, and I think it's
Mm,
because in standards, and this is not all, because I know some states have mandates, but that also doesn't mean that Black history is being taught. Teachers still can choose not to
that
do
part.
it, but I would give it a D just because there is a mention of Black people, like you said, normally the top five, and but we're
Hmm.
not going past that. Like we talk about Martin Luther King Jr., but only in January around his birthday. Happy birthday, Martin Luther King Jr. But we don't talk about any more about that. Kids are learning about enslavement, but either in a really traumatic way or just very surface level. So it's there, but it's just not being done, I don't think, effectively and in a way that students are willing to engage in it or want to engage in it, and are learning from it. It's just kind of it can be really problematic. Now there are some teachers out there doing it great, and I definitely appreciate that. And there are teachers who want to learn how to do it in a way that is effective. But I feel like elementary education as a whole doing Black history is not, when I would not give it the best grade because we can definitely do more.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I could hear the responses, or, we all have that inner lawyer that rises up to our defense when someone says, like, you're not doing this, or we could do more. And it's like, no, I do this and I do that. And you bring out your greatest hits. But rarely do we sit and reflect and really grow from the constructive criticism, the constructive feedback of people who actually care and want to see us grow and want to see us develop. I say that to say you spent time in the classroom
Mm.
for a number of years doing this work. Talk to me about that experience. Um, Talk to me about, maybe even if there's like a story
Mm.
where, because of your work, someone has been greatly impacted, in what they've learned and how they saw themselves or how they saw others, which is a big piece of
Yeah.
teaching Black history. Yeah, so talk to me about that.
Yeah, so the first time I kind of like engaged in it, I was a junior in college, undergrad, and we had to do like this huge unit, and you had to teach all content areas with this theme or topic. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I would do something with Black people. So I did the Harlem Renaissance. And I planned all these activities: math, science, literacy, social studies, read aloud, everything. And we did everything Harlem Renaissance. And so I'm like, if I can do this in 4 weeks with a multi age group of people for an assignment, I could do this in my classroom. And so that's
Mm,
just how it really started, like to be able to see myself as a student doing this work. And then bringing that when I graduated and had my own classroom. I will say one of my favorite stories to share is, teaching on Zoom, and, parents was in my business. I mean, they was in the classroom, like they were there with their kids. They're 5 and 6 on Zoom. So, they were there, and I was, teaching Black history in, different ways, usually through read alouds or videos. And during family teacher conferences, I had a dad say, at first I heard you was, teaching Black history, and I was like, he said, but I've seen just how she talks about situations, how she thinks about people, how, she asks different questions now because of what you've exposed her to. And this is this was a white dad, and with his talking about his white daughter. And so to me, not that I'm looking
mm,
for affirmation from parents, because I'm very transparent about what I teach and what I do in my classroom, but
mm,
it was affirming to see that he was, at first skeptical, and he didn't call and cuss me out or send me no nasty email or, call my principal. I think he just sat in it for a while and listened, and then was able to see how it influenced and affected his daughter. So I thought that was big of him to even share, because he didn't have to say anything to me. He could have just let it
Right,
be, but for
right.
him to kind of speak up and share that, I think is important. And then of course I had a black mom who came to me and was like, she came home talking about black inventors, and I'm like, where are you learning this at? So she was just really excited to know that her, black
Yeah.
daughter was also learning these things in the classroom. So it's just really cool to show what parents are thinking too and how they express that. So I absolutely love it. And that just keeps me going, of course, too.
The father you mentioned with his um, skepticism, almost resistance
Mm,
to, all he heard was that you were teaching Black history,
yeah,
and there was some type of response.
right.
Why do you think people are so defensive or triggered or skeptical, whatever word they want to use, from just the mention of Black history? Like, what do you
Yeah.
think that's rooted in?
I was actually just talking to my friends about this today. I feel like Black history has been branded as this bad thing, and that is this we only talk
Mhm.
about traumatic events or enslavement. Like we don't want to talk to kids about that. Or segregation or racism or white supremacy, like I feel like that's how it's been branded. And I remember teaching a social studies course last semester, and one of my students were like, why do they always associate Black history with negative things? And I think that's what it is. Like you say Black history and people are like, I can't teach that. Or I don't want my kids learning that. But it's like, you haven't even let me tell you what part of Black history or which Black history I'm sharing. So I think it's just been branded
Mhm.
as this, no, we don't talk about Black history because it's so traumatic and I don't want my kids to feel bad or be sad. And it's like, there's so much more to Black history than what you're thinking or what you think you know.
Yeah, part of that is the understanding, or excuse me, the misconception that we are a monolith,
Yeah.
right? And therefore our history should be understood with this linear path of what you've already previously been taught.
Hmm.
But then the other side is, I think that there is a tendency to understand blackness and Black people strictly, primarily, and I would argue only from the lens of white people or
Oh,
whiteness.
yes.
And
Yep.
so we don't get the freedom and breadth of expression to be outside of what I'm going to term as the white gaze.
Hmm.
And therefore, when you say Black history, all these understandings pop up for people because that's what they've been trained to see. Would you agree with that? And secondly, how do we combat? How do we open people's minds to the greatness, the expansiveness that is Black history?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Something my advisor, Dr. King, talks about is teaching, instead of teaching about Black histories, teaching through them. And so that's definitely a solution. Like
There it is.
I mentioned in Beyond February, this idea that we have all these single or repeated or false narratives about people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Harriet Tubman. But if you do research, you can talk about like their humanity, but also the other people that were working alongside them. Like they weren't doing it alone. There were so many other people, and there were so many other things going on as well. And so I definitely think that's one way we combat it. And I always talk about like using picture books that do a really good job of like presenting a bunch of different information for kids and not just this one thing like, oh, Martin Luther King had a dream. Okay, but he had some other things going on too. Like, what about the other parts of him? And so I definitely
Yeah.
think that's a way we can like kind of dig in and like just not teaching like surface level. Like, okay, I marked that off. I talked about a Black person today. Like, no, that don't cut it because that's how we do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's absolutely a checklist,
Mm,
and we've done our good deed for the day by mentioning you know, the the whitewashed version of King.
yeah.
Or, we won't get into, a letter from a Birmingham jail, or we won't get into his speeches where he starts talking about how, if we're really gonna, next time we go, we
Mm,
coming to get our check.
mm.
We ain't talking about that King,
No, no,
you
no.
know? And I think that there is a sense in which not only are we going to surveillance or
Mm.
surveil, watch, and police the bodies of Black people in present, we're also going to do that in the past.
Oh yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. We control what Black History's kids learn. Yep, we
Yeah.
surveil it. We choose like what can they see, what can they learn, what can't they learn. Like let's be careful, not too much. That's definitely was yeah.
Which is amazing to me because there's a lot of parents who will say, I got to really watch what my kids are learning or this and that, but will hand them a cell phone with TikTok on it.
Come on,
And it's like, do you
ain't
not
no
know what's going on as they continue to swipe?
right,
Like, you surveilling that?
right.
Like, it is, it is amazing to me. So let me ask you this: you've done, you've taught, you've offered. Um, you're gonna have to help me with this one because I believe it was outside of the classroom. You were offering like either it was tutoring or a program outside, like a supplemental
Yes,
program where you were
yeah,
helping families. Talk
yeah.
to me about that endeavor.
Yeah, so it was the Black History Club. My best friend's mama
Bless you.
had put together this online like Zoom meeting, and she was like, "I want you to talk to people about what you do." And so I was talking to the community in Kansas City where I'm from, and one of the parents were like, "Do you do Black History tutoring?" And I was like, "No." I said, "But I want to start this club, like this after school club." And this was during COVID, so I'm like, I can't like do it in person. And so I did it on
Yeah.
Zoom. I got 15 kids on there from like different places around the country, and yeah, it became the Black History Club, and we learned Black history for an hour each week from September to
Mm.
May. And each month was a theme, and they had this final project. We got to put art up in a museum. Like, it was just really cool. But yeah, it was just a way for us to learn Black history, for them to build a community where they could ask the questions and learn about things that they were not learning in school. But then I heard like they were taking what they were learning and telling their teachers, like, hey, did you know this was happening? So they're taking that with them to school, and they're like, my teacher won't answer
Yeah.
my hand anymore because I didn't told her, this, that, and whatever. But it was just really cool to just be in that space with them and allow them to just be, and learn.
Mm.
It was just so many different kids, not just Black kids, and it was a multi-age group. So it was just really a really cool experience for me, and I'm sure for them and their families too.
The reason I asked you to talk a little bit about that is we tend to view school as the primary or only place and space of learning.
Yes.
And so you have found, I'm going to use the word success, you have found ways to connect and build spaces of learning and growth and community outside of the traditional, you know, K to 12
Mhm.
schooling experience that we know in these yet to be United States of America. And I would love to know if you were to think through your time in the classroom and your time with the club,
Mhm.
like teaching Black history, what were some of the things you could compare and contrast for us about both of those experiences for the educators who are listening?
Yeah, I mean, specifically with the Black History Club, like these parents, these families wanted their kids to know this history. Like they were like, I want to know what's going on. They wanted, they were sitting in on it and then sending me emails after, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that, or we found this. Like they were sending pictures, like, look what we saw at the store today, like, or look at this, look what we found, and it was similar.
Yeah,
Actually, in my kindergarten classroom, but I guess it was more
yeah,
of a space where I was hearing from teachers and hearing like, oh, you're doing that? Is that in the standard? Is that in the curriculum? And I'm like, stay out of my business. Like my kids are learning. Like they doing exactly what your kids are doing, but with a different lens. And so it's not that those
yeah.
kindergarten parents didn't want their kids to learn Black history. Again, I was transparent with it, but with the Black History Club, like their family signed them up, like my kids gonna come, and they paid for it, to come. They receive resources, and they were able to do this work as a family, which is definitely just a big difference from like wanting and then just your child being in a space where they are learning Black history.
Being able to navigate both spaces speaks to, you know, the who you are as an educator for sure. The buy-in you've been able to receive
Mm.
um, from folks who are coming in, obviously wanting it in the Black History Club, but also from folks who are like, I don't know what this Black History Club, this Black History stuff you talking about, but I'm gonna come and see,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And they're coming in with a very different lens. You said you quoted Dr. LeGarrette King,
Mm-hmm.
and you state in the book that history with a Y denotes a singular narrative. But when we think about histories, our histories have multiple perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I love that quote. I love what it brings to light for us. So I'm gonna give you an example for me. So I was very late to the game with if I turn my camera, and I'm gonna do it just for the purposes of this, you'll see Uncle Jimmy right there. Uh, James Baldwin.
Mm-hmm.
I was late to the game with Uncle Jimmy. I was not exposed to the greatness that is Uncle Jimmy till much later on in my. This is why I feel like I was robbed because I didn't even know anything about like so. So I was literally just scrolling through on my little my library app. It's called Libby, and you can get a audio book and you can download it. And I was like, you know what? I this is like years ago now, but I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and listen to Uncle Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fire next time. That was my first exposure to Uncle Jimmy. It wasn't, you know, like I dove in the deep end.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm listening to him and he's talking and just waxing eloquent as he always does, talking to his nephew about the complexities of America and the human experience, the Black human experience here. And I felt equal parts just enamored, but also enraged that I did not these weren't things that I learned about in school. I had to read Shakespeare. I had to read um, books by authors who did not reflect my experience nor talk about things that I was um, deeply invested and interested in. Like my learning inside the classroom and my learning in my world were two different worlds. And I had to learn how to breathe in both
Mm-hmm.
worlds. And I think that there are educators out there who don't know that reality. Like they're just kind of going through the curriculum and trusting, right? Because there's a level of trust with, you know, that they might have from our majority counterparts, right? That they might have with certain systems and procedures because they haven't been affected by it. My question for you, and we could kind of bounce this around and talk about it different ways, but like when you talk about having multiple perspectives
Mm-hmm.
in our histories and understanding those multiple perspectives, my first thing is, well, how do we do that when I know educators who have only had one and only know one
Mm-hmm.
and have to unlearn? Like, what does that process look like? And I know you get into it in the book, but I just
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah. No, so
throw the oop to you.
something I always like during professional developments or if I'm doing a webinar is I tell teachers that they have to educate themselves. Like your district unfortunately may not give you the PD. Like your school teacher education program may not give it to you. Like you gotta read, you gotta watch, you gotta listen to podcasts, there's documentaries, there's all kind of stuff. But if you really want to do this work, like you would anything else, if you're teaching a math concept and you don't know it, you're gonna go do some research and figure out how to do it.
Yeah,
Same thing with Black
yeah.
history. If you really want to do this work, you'll go read about it. You'll go find people who are doing it. You'll attend conferences. You'll do what you need to do so that you can learn. So I always talk about the importance of educating self because I mean I learn something and unlearn something new every day about Black history, Blackness. And so, but I do that through reading. I do that through conversations and attending, conferences or webinars or watching things on, Netflix or whatever. But we have to educate ourselves. Like nobody's just going to hand it
Yeah.
to us. I mean, I try to hand to you in beyond February, but you have to, but you got to be willing to open the book and read it. So, but you have to want it for yourself and to also see the importance of it, and how it connects to so many different things.
I don't know if we were recording at the time, but when I was talking to you, I was like, I love how you have left no excuse for folks. Like if people open your work here, this labor of love, like it's not just, hey, go do it. All right. I'll talk to you later. It's
Right.
like, no, here are the essential ideas. Here are some people. Here are some activities. Here's an example of it being done. Here's the history behind it being done. Like, you break this thing down for folks. And I love that the way that you call us forward in this work is to say, to remind folks, whoever's opening it, that they are whole people that
Yes.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, we tend to break people down to the best or worst, depending on how we feel
Yeah.
about that person, and that's how we learn them, right? So,
Hmm.
so the whitewashed version of King is him standing and delivering the "I Have a Dream" speech, and you're gonna only rip the two quotes out of context that you want. You're only gonna see those two things happen, and rip them out of context, and at the end of it, you're going to criticize him for the investigations that the CIA and all these other folks are doing as they were tapping them phones, and not criticize the government for the overreach, even though
Right.
that's that's what the
Surveillance.
talking points are now. Here's my question, um, and I, please take it and run with it as only you
Mm.
can. But like, when we have this continual breakdown of, I'm going to say, Black people, that's what we're talking about, Black history, where it is the accomplishments and then the criticisms, and that's all we focus on. How do we retrain folks? How do we engage folks? How do we unlearn to really see the wholeness, the humanity in some folks that they don't even like? If they ain't gonna see the humanity in you and I, how they gonna do that with somebody who's gone and can't even defend their humanity in front of them?
Yes, I actually did an activity with the Black History Club as well. We talked a little bit about it in my kindergarten classroom, but we talked about the Black Panther Party. And
Yeah.
me growing up, like I'm like, oh, like they scary. They got guns. What was they doing? They out here with weapons. And then you learn about Martin Luther King, who's so peaceful, and then Malcolm X, who's so he want to fight. So it's like, is that bad to want to fight? And so I had my Black History Club. I said, I want y'all to do an investigation. Who are the Black Panthers? Who are they? Like, and
Mm,
so they did different research. They learned about different people, the people that made up the Black Panther Party, the fact that the Black Panther Party was across the country. I had interviewed my uncle, and I
mm,
mentioned this in the book, my Uncle Brian, who talked about it, that he had this fear. And my grandma was like, no, the Black Panthers are going to protect you. So I shared that with my students. And in the end, they were like, the Black Panthers was just about their people, about their community. And so for them to take the time and for me to provide the resources, of course, and I had to do the research, for them to determine,
mhm,
like, like they were important. And then I had one was like, well, why don't we do this now? And I'm like, hold on, shut it, calm down. But they were just ready to be about their community and go out and, get beret. Like they were ready. But I had to give them the space to see for themselves. Like I could have easily came in and been like, okay, there's Martin Luther King Jr. and then there's the Black Panthers and Malcolm X, and they were so violent. But it's like once you kind of get to know their reason behind the things that they did, and that they too were humans trying to protect and love on other humans, then kids just really get to see the truth beyond it. That's what's happened. Like when we do like the bad and the good, like we're hiding some other truths in there too. And we have to remember, like, these people were humans. They weren't heroes and villains. Like they're people just like you and me. Because
yeah,
I wouldn't want somebody to only talk about the bad things that I've done. Like, what else did
right,
Dawnavyn do? Or why did she do those bad things? Like, there's reasons behind, everything. So I just think it's important
yeah,
for us to provide the space for students, but for ourselves, like, you have to do a little bit of research and realize that we're all human in this, even though a lot of the people we talk about with Black history are no longer with us. Um, they are
yeah.
still humans living in different times.
I think that's key, because understanding that every single person a has a story that is worth telling
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that you have to agree with the horrible, quote unquote, horrible things that someone has done to learn about it and to understand it and to get to and to be curious about it.
Yes.
I think that we've lost a sense of curiosity.
Yes.
We so badly in our country want to just label and ostracize and put into compartments so you know where people stand. We want to make our stances nice and neat. Perfect example. At the time of this recording, we are literally having people be silenced for saying
Mm,
things like free Palestine. And then we have other folks who are like, well, if you say that, you're anti Semitic. And it's like, that's not what I'm saying.
great.
I'm simply saying that there's some people on the other side that we need to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, you're supporting the terrorist organization. No,
I didn't say
I'm
that.
simply
Yeah.
saying there's some people on the other side that we need to think about.
Yes. Absolutely.
And and we don't have the ability, it seems, to look at a complicated, nuanced situation and see that there can be multiple truths of the same situation.
Yeah.
Like, well, what if somebody came here and they went into a music festival and shot people up? Yes, those people deserve to be brought to justice.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Right.
At the same time, bombing and doing all the things that we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
not now it does, but
Right.
that is happening may not be the most advantageous way to bring about that justice, because now there's other folks on the other side being deeply impacted by this, whose families are being torn apart by this, and it's a complicated system. It is a complicated thing to navigate. And what I'm thinking is the response to this has been, well, you stand there,
Mm.
I'll stand here, and this is the line in the sand.
Yeah.
And there's no curiosity, there's no connection, there's no, well, why do you feel that way? Tell me
Right.
more about that so I can
Conversation.
learn a little bit about more people. There's none of that. And yet and still we're called to do that in education, in
Yeah.
the classroom. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you did with the kids.
Yeah.
You called them to be curious.
Yeah.
So, teeing it up for you, how do we foster curiosity in
Mhm.
ourselves
Yeah.
as well as in our students?
Yes. In ourselves, I think it's just important to think about like what things interest us. Because even as adults and educators, like there are still things that you're really interested in, things that get you giddy and excited. Like I love like when I'm scrolling on social media seeing like old historical photos. Like I saw one of Shirley Chisholm and I was like, I just saved it because I'm like, oh, I could use that for something. And so I think
Mm,
another way to spark curiosity is just by reading. Like my Black history interest right now is cuisine, like all things food. So I found like so many picture books, documentaries, cookbooks. And I think with students, just presenting them with as much as many topics as possible, but also like even something as simple as like showing them a picture and like not saying anything and just sitting in the silence, and they'll start to wonder, they'll start to ask questions, they'll start to talk.
mm,
And eventually, I
mm,
mean, I think kids are natural researchers anyway because they want to know so much and they want to, okay, well, how do I figure that out? Like I want to know, like, are you going to tell me? And I just, yeah, I think it's just important to show them so many things, expose them to things, and just give them the space. Like we don't have to give direct instruction all the time. Like just let your students be, like let them, imagine, let them inquire, let them look things up or read things on their own. So I did a lot of that in my classroom. Like here's a photo or here's a song, like let's listen to it, like what do you think? And I think that's important, and especially reading sparks so much curiosity, so much.
mm. Mm-hmm. One of the competing things with what you're talking about is relinquishing control.
Mm.
Like, learning has to look a certain way because we have been indoctrinated as educators that we must be the sage on the stage. We must be the person that learning comes from me to y'all. This is this banking model system. Shout out to Paulo Freire that says, you know, you learn because I'm depositing into your bank. You have nothing to give. You have nothing to bring. I bring it all, and that's what this is. But I hear you saying, educators, we must do away with that practice
Yeah.
because students have so much to give, so much to bring, and their level of expertise is something that can help create a classroom where we are co-learning together,
Absolutely.
being curious together, asking questions together, and yes, getting to some answers together.
Together, yeah.
Folks may not have been able This might be the first time they've been hiding under a rock, Dawnavyn. They don't know your brilliance, and they want to now connect with you. How can folks tap into you? And please tell them how to get this book into their hands.
Yes, you can follow my Instagram that I'm usually on every day. Queendom Teaching. So that's my handle on Instagram. And then you can purchase Beyond February at Rutledge.com. Or you can do Amazon. But wherever you purchase it, you can also leave a review on Amazon, even if you don't buy it from there. So, or some people have it in their local bookshop. I know one of my local bookstores has it. So, yeah.
So I'm going to challenge us to grab this book and connect with my good sis, because, like, I know it says K-3, but with the ways that like, I'm in middle school, like, we could do this.
Yeah.
Because of how deprived our Black history curriculum has been. And I am in a district that is majority Black.
Yeah.
And so I want to thank you for this work, this labor of love. I want to thank you for sharing time and space with the Liberation Lab community.
Of course.
Any final thoughts or anything that you want to leave the people with, as we close out our time together?
Teach Black history, y'all. I promise. And buy my book so I can show you how to do it. It's possible. I did it for 7 years. It's possible. Yes. Teach Black history.
100%.
Yeah.
Please go out and buy this wonderful book. Get it in your hands. Leave a review on all the things. Everything you can leave one on. Give her 5 stars and go ahead. Because I'm telling you, as a creator myself, it is hard to put out a labor of love and have people simply consume and not even do something like leave a review or comment or like it or share it. So I'm going to say it for her. When you buy, please leave a review, because it helps expand the reach of that labor of love. Yes. Don't just consume, help share so other people can be impacted by it too. Absolutely. So sis, thank you so much for this time, and thank you for just what you mean to education at large and the work that you're continuing to do. Tap into her work, y'all. Queendom Teaching on Instagram, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Peace.
Thanks.